All right, Skylar, we about ready to rock? All right. Hello, fellow Rotarians. My name is Reed Miller, and I am your president of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our weekly membership meeting. I will now ask that you all join me in reciting the four-way test. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right, at this time, I ask any Rotarians who have invited a guest to please raise your hand so that you can introduce your guest to the club. And if you are a visiting Rotarian, please raise your hand and introduce yourself or let us know that you're here in the chat box.
Funda has a guest. Funda, do you want to introduce your guest, please?
I think my guest is not on the call yet, so I'll wait just a little bit for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
All right, thanks, Carol. Well, hearing none, let's get this rolling. So thank you to all of our members for joining us here today for another Zoom meeting. And I want to start out by reminding all of you that this is one of our last fully virtual meetings. Yes, as we have mentioned, we continue to work towards our goal of getting back to in-person meetings by the first of the year. Our leadership team, as well as our board of directors, continue to meet regularly to work out the details moving forward. At this time, we want all of you to mark your calendars for our in-person meeting at the Sentinel on January 4th. Since we understand not all of our members are hearing this announcement, we will be sending out emails specific to this event, and it will be noted in the weekly spokes communication, and we'll be sending out text messages the day before as well as the day of our in-person meeting on January 4th. And I'll remind you all, pre-registration will be required for our in-person meetings, and we'll be requiring confirmation of vaccination or a negative test to attend the meeting. In addition, masks will be required while we are not eating. We will be providing a virtual feed, but we want our members to understand that the virtual experience will lack some of the features that our in-person attendees will have. We want our members that choose not to attend in person to be able to follow along, but we also want them to understand that the experience will be limited. It's not possible at this time, as you may experience here. We're able to have the speaker as well as the stream as we're in person. If we have an iPad up there showing the stream, we're only going to be able to show one view, and so they're probably not going to get the presentation at the same time. Our apologies about that, but the hope is that most, if not all of our members will feel comfortable and safe to attend in person. We will be verifying the registration and vaccination status at the door. And I think that's all we've got for our announcements here. So I'm going to move on to the rest of our program, but I wanted to get that out there so everybody's on the same page as far as our plan moving forward and getting back to in-person meetings on, again, January 4th at the Sentinel. Look forward to seeing all of you there. Okay, we've made it to December, so I'd like to take this opportunity to wish a happy birthday to our Rotarians that have a birthday in the month of December. Thank you, Skylar, for showing that. Please make note here of our Rotarians with birthdays this month and make them feel like they are loved. Reach out to our Rotary members and wish them a happy birthday. Okay, it is now my pleasure to hand over the meeting to our Vice President, Maria Schell, to speak with you about our annual Trust Drive. Maria, welcome.
Thank you so much, President Reed, and good afternoon, 6 minutes into the afternoon. We have every week starting the beginning of November, we are in the process of doing our annual Trust Drive. So for those of you who are newer to Rotary, our Trust Drive is our one short time in the year where we're asking for all of you to think about your philanthropy and how you might want to give back to the Rotary Club. I'm looking around my Zoom boxes and I see many of you who serve on the committees that are dependent upon these funds every year. So the great work that I see Danielle that she's doing with our International Service Committee and Bill Durville on the Domestic Violence Solutions Committee. These committees are really all looking for what is the result of our Rotary Trust Drive every year so that they can budget and plan to be able to support the work they're doing throughout the community. So you're going to see Skylar will put a link in the chat. This will be a place that you could go make your pledge or your gift right away. You don't have to make that gift today. You can say, I plan to do this. I plan to do it maybe, $30 a month for the next year. You can plan to make your gift and hold it until next January or February. We have all different ways that you can make your gifts to the Rotary Club. So we are there to help you figure that out for those who haven't yet made their contributions. And then a thank you to some of you on the screen today who have joined my volunteer group of campaigners for the Trust Drive campaign. So you might be getting a phone call from some of our wonderful fellow Rotarians here in the coming weeks. But like you all know, you're only going to hear from me for a short amount of time, from now until the end of January. That's our time. And then we get to focus on the great work of spending all of that wonderful, wonderful money that you're all supporting us with. So thank you again so much for all of you who've already made your contributions, for those of you who are thinking about it. And please do let me know if you have any questions about the work and the impact of your giving, or if you want to know how much you gave last year. I've gotten a lot of asks about that. So feel free to shoot me a note, or we can follow up with you later. Thank you, and back to you, President Reed.
All right, thank you so much, Maria. Wonderful to hear from you, and appreciate all the hard work that you're putting in there on the Trust Drive. And I repeat that. I think she delivered the message absolutely perfectly. I hope you all get out there and make your pledges and your donations as soon as possible. Don't put that off. I'm sure we have a couple of people that put it off and forget about it every year. So don't be that person. Anyways, thank you so much, Maria. And I did hear we had our guest show up. Funda, did you want to introduce your guest here?
Yes, please. Everyone, meet my dear friend Darya Esener. She is from Istanbul originally and lives here in Portland last about, I think, 6 years now. And she is interested in our club. And I said, why don't you just come and join us on our Zoom meeting? Welcome, Darya.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Istanbul. What a wonderful pleasure to have you with us today. And thank you so much for bringing on the guest, Funda. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And at this time, I would now like to welcome Rotarian Angel Pilato, who will be presenting this week's reflection. Welcome, Angel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome guests. Today is the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, a day that President Roosevelt said would live in infamy, and that more than 2,400 servicemen were killed in that attack. And I read this morning, or maybe yesterday, that there's two veterans still alive from that attack, and they're 100 years old. So you can only imagine, if you can do the math, it's not that hard, to know how young they were at that time. And I got to thinking about what would be important to remember about this. One of the things, of course, is that we wanted to honor those people who were there. And also would like to say that there's still 82,000 service personnel that are MIA. And most of them are from World War II. In other words, they don't know who they are, they don't know where they are. And that's still something that bothers the families of those service personnel. But I thought even deeper than that about conflict and how we as a country or we as individuals get into conflicts, and how we as an individual person can change that. And I wanted to read a quote from the Dalai Lama, who's, of course, the person who has been involved with peace efforts a lot. And he says, peace does not mean the absence of conflict or of conflicts. Differences will always be there. peace means solving these differences through peaceful means, through dialogue, through education, knowledge, and through humane ways. And we as Rotarians might want to think about, and I think about this myself, how can I solve conflicts peacefully within my own family, within my own neighborhood, within my own city, and then it goes out further. And if we begin to think about that, then we can have an impact not only on our own families, but that will transmute into bigger peace efforts. Now Japan is one of our biggest allies, and I often think over this. I wonder why there wasn't a way that we couldn't have figured this out before the loss of all these lives on both sides. But today, let's just think about how we can keep the peace in our own family and our own community. So that's my remembrance of the day that will live in infamy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angel. Appreciate that reflection today, and something we should all remember. And I appreciate you bringing that to light there, and certainly powerful words there, trying to solve conflict with peace in a peaceful way. So thank you so much for that. And like you said, in our families, in our communities, and with our friends, as much as anywhere else. And if any of you are also interested in giving a reflection in the future, please reach out to Susan Cooksey to set up a date to schedule your reflection. Her email is twonavycaptains@gmail.com and will be dropped into the chat. Thank you, Skylar. Now it is time for our breakout room with a few of your fellow Rotarians. When you enter the breakout room, please introduce yourselves to the others in your group. As always, you're more than welcome to chat openly with your fellow Rotarians, but as a conversation starter, I recommend you discuss your holiday traditions. Do you have any traditions from when you were a young child that have stayed with you and your family to this day? Okay, remember these breakout rooms are to give you the opportunity to socialize with your fellow Rotarians, like we will soon be able to on January 4th, back at the Sentinel, at our upcoming in-person meetings. My point is, go have some fun with your fellow Rotarians, and we'll see you back here in about, let's call it 10 minutes. Ready, break. All right, welcome back. Get caught up in these conversations and table topics. Man, I tell you, I hope you all had as much fun as we did. We had a great conversation. It's great to see you all back here. And let's move right on through into our program. So now please welcome Rotarian Leslie Brunker as your chair of the day. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to see you all. Happy holiday season. So we have a treat today. I first heard Lakayana Drury speak at a meeting of the Community Peace Collaborative. He brought a group of young Black men with him who were involved in his program called Word is Bond. I was so impressed with this man's vision, his leadership, his energy, and commitment to make a positive difference in our community. Later, I heard him interviewed on OPB's program called Think Out Loud. Lakayana has lived in Portland for 5 years. He came to us from Washington, D.C. by way of Wisconsin. His background is in education and community organizing, and he taught at Rosemary Anderson High School. Lakayana is the founder and executive director of Word is Bond and was recently named one of Portland Business Bureau or Business Journal's 40 Under 40. Word is Bond started in the summer of 2017 with the goal of creating positive relationships between young Black men and law enforcement. They launched a 6-week paid internship experience with a cohort of 4 young Black male leaders. This evolved into a program called Rising Leaders Internship, the organization's successful flagship program that now runs every summer. Rising Leaders has grown from a program focused primarily on engagement between young Black men and law enforcement to a comprehensive leadership experience that focuses on the total development of young Black men. I invited Lakayana to join our Rotary Club because he is a stellar leader. He is walking the talk. He's a peace builder every day. I'm thrilled that he took me up on the idea of joining us. Now join me in welcoming as our featured speaker today, Lakayana Drury.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I know we had talked about presenting me, but that honestly was above and beyond. And I might need your notes on that because that was really well put together explanation of how our organization came together. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to share my screen and start with my presentation, and it'll kind of dive into some of the things that Leslie talked about and a whole bunch more. So thank you all for having me here today. Okay, y'all can see that? Perfect. So switch my screen a little bit here. So yeah, my presentation is called A Leap of Passion, My Journey to Starting Word is Bond. And I'll dive into a little bit more about what I consider a leap of passion, but I feel like it really defines my entire journey of my life. Starting off, I just want to thank the Rotary Club, specifically Leslie, for sponsoring my first year membership here and inviting me to be part of the club, for Dev Dixon for inviting me to speak and kind of walking me through that whole process, and for all of you for the work that you do in the community here in Portland. A little bit about me, past what Leslie had said, is I'm a storyteller. So being able to speak today is right in line with everything that I love to do. I'm an educator, and I'm also a community organizer. I feel like there's different labels you could probably use, but these are the 3 that just kind of stand out to me. And so I want to start my my presentation today with a trip that I canceled about 5 years ago. And I'm going to really stick to my time here so that we can try and have some questions at the end. I know we won't get through everything in this presentation, but 5 years ago, I moved to Portland from Philadelphia, where I was teaching at a middle school. And in the summer of 2017, after my first year of teaching, I had been saving up money every paycheck to do a trip to Europe for the summer. It was my first summer that I was actually going to have a real summer vacation as a teacher. So I was planning this trip out, and I had bought like train tickets and plane tickets, and I was like one paycheck away from buying the hotels, right? And I got a call, or a series of communications, I'll say, from the CEO of Rosemary Anderson High School, Joe McFerrin. And that was interesting because Joe was someone whose attention I had been trying to get since I came to Portland. And when I came to the school, it had about 100 employees in 4 schools. So Joe being the CEO, I know he didn't know everybody at that school, but I was determined, and I can't 100% say why, that I wanted him to know who I was. And so in my work in the classroom, I was teaching social studies. I just made sure that the work I did made it to his desk. And for example, in the spring, I took a group of students to the Hollywood Max stop where the Max train attacks had just happened. And we spent the day doing artwork and chalk and just kind of sifting through our feelings with that really heavy day and experience. And a lot of our students knew the 2 girls that were verbally attacked prior to the physical attack of that incident, 2 young Black women. And so fast forward like a month and a half, I'm preparing for this trip, and I get a series of communications from Mr. McFerrin about a program, a summer project that he and some other community members were trying to develop. And they were looking for someone to write a curriculum and bring youth together for this project. And knowing that that had been one of my goals the whole year was to get Joe's attention, I said I would go to the meeting, and it was at the Broadmoor Golf Course out there by the airport. If any of you remember that golf course, it's no longer there. And what I walked into was basically a boardroom full of mostly white folks sitting around a table in this golf course. And, you know, I'm a first year teacher. I'm like 27 at the time. And the whole stage feels very overwhelming. And as I sit through this meeting, they are introducing this project that they've been trying to launch of bringing together youth and police. And they have ropes courses. There's a police officer there, and he's got access to training facilities and people who can get us technology grants and things of that nature. And being a teacher, right, I'm used to fighting over a box of pencils, right? When you're a teacher, you have to be scrappy, and you know, resources are hard to come by. So to sit in a room like this is like winning the educational Super Bowl. And so I had this trip planned, and they're telling me about this project that they've got going on. And then they're asking me if maybe I know, since I can't be a part of this experience, if I know somebody else who could help lead the program. And as I'm sitting there thinking about it, I'm like, gosh, like this seems like a really amazing opportunity. And when I get done with this meeting, I'm going to call my mom and just run it by her and see what she thinks I should do. Because I've kind of got a feeling that maybe this might be an opportunity worth considering my Europe trip for. And so I sat through the meeting more and more. And by maybe a third of the way through it, 2/3 of the way through it, I was convinced that I was going to cancel that trip, regardless of what my mom says, which I'm sure is a lot of nightmare to a lot of parents after you got something like that and you spent your money on. But what I heard and what I saw were two different things. What I heard was a project that could go many different ways. But what I saw was this. This is us this past summer after 5 years of running what would eventually become Word is Bond. But at the time at the Broadmoor Golf Course, it was just a bunch of people sitting around a room dreaming of an idea. But I had a vision in my head of what this could be. And so in that moment, I canceled my trip to Europe, ate all the funds that I had spent, the money, because what I believed was in front of me was a unique opportunity and coincided with a lot of things in my own life. And we ran the project that summer with 4 youth. And after that summer, I approached Mr. McFerrin and I said, I want to turn this into a nonprofit. I probably should have done some research on what exactly a nonprofit was, but that's always the case with me. When I get something in my head, you better watch out, because it'll be very hard to pry my mind in a different direction. I honestly thought Mr. McFerrin would want to keep it under the auspices of Rosemary Anderson. But to my surprise, he was in full support of me taking this and turning it into a nonprofit. And so that is the journey of how Word is Bond began. But the process of what would become Word is Bond goes back to the youngest parts of when I was a kid, and the journey to become the young man that I've grown into. And so after the Broadmoor Golf Course day, there was one of the community members. Me and him went to Costco to pick up food for this first year of this program. And the first thing he said to me, we met it back at the Broadmoor Golf Course. The first thing he said to me when I got in his car was, "Where the heck did you get that name?" And I thought it was funny, but it's a question I've heard a million times, and I'm sure some of you have probably looked at my screen and attempted to pronounce it, and you had Leslie's help in getting it 100% right. But I would say my name has shaped my entire experience. So my name, Lakayana, is a West African folktale about a little boy with a spear. I'm biracial, so My mother is from a small town in Wisconsin called Portage. It's as small as it sounds. And my dad is from South Sudan in East Africa, right below Egypt. So me being born also is quite unlikely, as unlikely as my name. So when I was born, my dad had a whole list of African names, and he shared it with my mom, and together they went through. And when my mom came to the name Lakayana and she heard about the folktale about the little boy with the spear, she was convinced that that was my name. And I think that that's really important to my identity because I grew up without my father. So having that name always gave me attachment to him. It always gave me attachment to my Black identity, and it sealed my fate for all of my entire educational history, that there would never be a class that I could go into and just sit down and disappear into the classroom. Every teacher for every grade stumbled over it. Every student either made fun of it or was confused by it. And so it's, you know, as I bumped and scraped my way through this country and the cultural experiences, that came with me. So that gentleman who asked me that question, I think it's a question that a lot of people have and is central to who I am. And I live in multiple worlds. Being a biracial individual, being Black and white particularly, means I'm at the collision of two worlds that are often at odds. This is my first world. So this is my mom, Teresa, and my two younger siblings, Makiba and Nigel. And this is who I grew up with. I was the oldest. So, you know, all three of us were biracial children. So we were the first in our family, and my mom's white family, to not only be Black, but to not have, you know, my mom's siblings' names are John, James, Julia, right? Traditional white American Christian names. So for my entire experience growing up, I've been used to navigating white spaces and having my identity, my name, and everything else juxtaposed to that. On the other side, is my father, who I didn't meet till I was 10 years old. And that also shaped me a lot, his absence. And it wasn't until I was much older that I could really place the absence and what that was, but it is a profound impact on me. And we've had a decent relationship that could be expected after meeting someone when you're 10 years old. And I think a lot of it rests in me and how I decide to reconcile or approach my father for his absence, which was and I can't even honestly explain why he was absent. It's not like he was in jail for 100 years or whatever it was, for a variety of reasons. I'll just place it in trauma. And I think trauma is something that I've been exploring a lot recently, just exploring my own traumas and the traumas generation. I would say today, I don't think there's a person alive who is not impacted by trauma, and trauma that starts before they were even born, right? So the reason my father was absent in my life started before I was even born, but especially as Black young men, we internalize the absence of our fathers in a much different way. But I would say maybe, I can only speak to my experience, but I think a lot of us maybe interpret that absence has something to do with us, when in reality it doesn't. I honestly didn't ever believe that, but I also was still pained by his absence, and it shaped a lot of my experiences growing up. I would say the other piece of it was the education system. And I struggled greatly in school. Beginning in about 6th grade, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. Of what sort, I'll never know, and I don't care too much to know. I didn't care back then, and but school was tough for me. Academically and socially, I didn't always fit in. And when I was diagnosed with that learning disability in 6th grade, it coincided with just an atrocious year academically. It was just a really challenging year. But the underpinning piece of all of it was my mother's belief in me and her insistence that my teachers educate me. And so it was a struggle and a battle throughout my entire educational experience. And I left high school without any real understanding of my Black identity or Black culture at all. And it was not only due to the fact that my father was not around to instill some of that, since he was the Black member of my family, but I could almost speak for any Black student that I went to school with, that there was no way that we gained any type of education about who our ancestors were. Everything, as I've analyzed it, looking back, was centered around the white experience. I had one Black teacher, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I would just like to invite all of you in our predominantly white audience here to imagine having one white teacher. Pick a class. What class would that be? One white teacher through your whole experience. I would imagine it's probably hard to even imagine what that would look like. And again, being a Black student, it's not like I realized this as I was sitting in my class, like, you know what, none of my teachers are Black. It was just the way things were. My only Black teacher was a 6th grade gym teacher. And so through discipline and disabilities, Black students were swallowed up. I saw a lot of Black students in our detention room, and I saw a lot of Black students in our, special needs classes. And that was kind of the way to siphon you out of the traditional track of education. I didn't learn about anybody Black besides Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks that were brought out every Black History Month. So as I'm leading to my experience to what would inspire me to create a program that works with just young Black men, I want y'all just to remember, these are the experiences that shaped me. So in 4th grade, my mom put me in the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program. I know they have a chapter right here in Portland, but she wanted me to have a Black male big brother. And they told her, if you want a Black male big brother, you're going to have to wait at least 2 years, because that's the wait time for a Black male mentor, because they're in such high demand and there's not many of them. Luckily for me, fate, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, I was matched with a Black male mentor, Kevin, who you see in this photo, within about 2 months of being in the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program. And he was able to fill a lot of that missing both male role modelship and also that Black male role model. And that's a thing with our programs, is that there isn't a lot of Black male connection. And it is imperative that young Black men have other Black men in their life. There is no substitute for that, especially given our experience in this country and experience of Black young men. They need that. And so for whatever foresight my mother had, it was great. And Kevin had just moved to Madison from Detroit. And he became a very strong pillar in my life. And me and Kevin are still connected. Let's say it's 22 years later. And so we've grown way beyond even the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program. So kind of wrapping this section up, it wasn't until I was 22, after spending 3 years at a community college, that I finally got into a 4-year university in northern Wisconsin. It was 7,000 white students and 100 Black students. But I blossomed in that university because I was away from my home for like the first time in my life, and it allowed me to kind of craft my own identity. And I stopped going by this nickname, which my nickname growing up was Lucky. And I had that nickname since about kindergarten. And of course, I believe everybody was overjoyed because they didn't have to deal with Lakayana, the name Lakayana. And one of the things I feel like that a lot of times we do in American culture is we try and nickname everybody whose name's not Sarah or James or Bill. And so by the time I got to this college, I was very into Black history. And, I was reading things like Malcolm X, and, he talks about the history of European names given to Black people. And here I am born with an African name. And so that really inspired me to say that I am going to go by my full African name, and I'm not going to allow people to give me a nickname. So if that's something you want to take away from today, is maybe avoiding the hesitation, especially with people of color or people with names of different cultures. Instead of, asking them, do you have a nickname? Try and take a step into their world and pronounce and learn their name. So the things I discovered at the university were not really in the classroom, but in the space of just being away from a lot of things that shaped me. I discovered how I learned. I discovered more about my identity, more about who I wanted to be. And I entered that school with a 2.3 GPA. That's what I graduated high school with. And after my second semester there, I had a 4.0. And the adult that I am today was really born out of that experience. So I'm gonna wrap things up very shortly. So fast forward, I came to Portland, Oregon, and I wanted to teach at a school that worked with students that were similar to myself. So I started at Rosemary Anderson High School. This is a picture of me in my classroom. I've got a whole bunch of African flags and Black posters up on the wall. And those never came down. There was no such thing as Black History Month in my classroom. There was just Black History Year. And we spent a lot of time doing that. I had other women of color, Latino, Native American, but I was just determined that if I was going to teach history, we were not going to learn about George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, especially not in the ways that it had been taught to me. And then, as I told you all in the beginning, that first summer of being at Rosemary Anderson was when I had the opportunity to become involved in Word is Bond. The name Word is Bond came from a song by the rapper Nas. The song's called, I think it's called The World Is Yours. And I was listening to the song. It's an old song, so it wasn't like during my time that I grew up. It was a little bit before that. But he used the phrase Word is Bond, and it's kind of used in a lot of hip hop songs. And so that's where the name came from. And yeah, it just symbolizes our words and that bond we have between individuals. So Word is Bond was established in 2017. Our mission is to rewrite the narrative between young Black men and law enforcement. As Leslie had mentioned, though, it's about empowering young Black men to discover their story. It's so much more than that. And so when we created Word is Bond, I already knew who the audience was. We were not going to serve all young people of color. We weren't going to be, the super group for everybody. And based on my experience growing up, I said, I want this program to be for young Black men and to address their specific needs in society. And so that is how our organization came to be. And that is the inspiration behind how I built it. We're now in our 5th year. We serve about 30 young men annually. Each summer, we have a group of law enforcement officers that participate each week in our program. So they come in on Tuesdays, and the rest of the days we spend doing public speaking, learning about public service, college exploration, career exploration. And we also do school year program as well. This March, we're going to be gearing up to do our first spring leadership forum, which is a 6-day trip that we will be taking to Washington, D.C. So we're currently in Give Guide and working on a donation program, and the funds for that will go to our spring leadership trip. And I wish I had about 40 more minutes and I would share a lot more, but I will end there for maybe a couple of questions. But I just appreciate everyone for listening to my story. And what I would say to all of our audience, our predominantly white audience here, is that you all have grown up as the focal point of our society. You all are the pieces that are held up, and there's a lot of people that grow up and might not even realize that they're decentered, that they're not part of that experience. And it's really hard to pull yourself back and realize and unpack all of those pieces. And I know that it's probably challenging for you as people who are centered, and none of you really asked to be centered, but the fact remains that you are centered. And so you have to believe people when they tell you, right, like, hey, like I'm experiencing this, or I feel, because we can't 100% just say like racism is just there. Like it's a hard thing to just say like where we're experiencing it or things of that nature, but believe, explore. And when you're in that discomfort, or like, oh, like somebody of color said something that made me feel uncomfortable or challenged my thought, dive into that, you know, and reflect on that. Why do I feel uncomfortable? Because I think that there's probably something there. So I'll end there, but thank you all for your time, and we'll take a few questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Lakayana. I really, really appreciate that presentation. That was absolutely phenomenal. And thank you so much for sharing. I know that was some pretty intimate stuff that you shared with us there. And I'm certain our audience learned a lot, not only about you, but about the journey that you've been on, and what we can take away from that. And I'm going to tell everybody something that I learned from Lakayana the first time that we spoke. And I was talking to him about my niece, who is biracial, and I referred to her as half Black. And Lakayana corrected me, saw it as a teaching moment that, you know, biracial, this person isn't half this or half that. They're a full person. And I thought that was really powerful. And I think that speaks a lot to who Lakayana is, and what he's trying to do as far as education, and a great opportunity. I certainly learned something, and I appreciate you sharing about your name as well, and sort of where that came from, and how you decided that that's going to be who you are, and what you want to represent you. So thank you so much for the presentation today. And I don't want to take too much time here. We do have probably about 3 or 4 minutes for questions here, and I'm sure that there are a few, but thank you so much, Lakayana.
Yeah, thanks, Reed.
Thank you. Danielle has a question.
Hi, Lakayana. Good to see you as always.
Likewise.
I've heard a little bit of your background from your presentations elsewhere in the past, but I'm unclear what age group you work with. And I had a thought about how to connect them with Rotary. Could you explain the age range of the young men with whom you're working?
Yeah, it's 16 to 21.
Okay, so you have high school and post-high school.
Correct.
Okay. Well, Rotary, you'll get to know as you spend more time with us, has a high school service program called Interact, and post-high schools starting at about age 19, 20, we have Rotaract. So offline, I'd love to talk to you about opportunities to connect with your young men and Rotary.
I love that. You know, thank you. I'm going to put my email right in here for you and anyone else who might already have it. Yeah.
Leslie, did you have a question too?
I do. I don't want to, like, I'm on the camera all morning, but so Lakayana, you didn't go to Europe. You canceled that trip. So did you ever get to go yet?
2018, I took a trip to Amsterdam, and I went to South Africa. So I went and seen Anne Frank's house and Nelson Mandela's cell. So I did have a consolation prize of sorts.
That's great. So I would like to personally help you go when you're ready to do your Europe trip that you canceled. And I would encourage our other Rotarians to chip in.
Thank you. I'll definitely take you up on that offer, hopefully sometime soon. Thank you, Leslie.
I think we have time for one more question from Angel.
Lakayana, I don't have any trouble with your name at all. And Angelica, I got the nickname Angel because some lady couldn't pronounce it when I was working at 16. And so there you go. Anyway, question, how do the police and the Black young men, how does this come about, and how is it working, and where are the police with this?
So yeah, that's the most challenging part, right? So each summer we select the youth, they apply to our program, they hear about us through their school, through social media, through friends, and then the officers, we reach out to them. I build relationships with the different law enforcement agencies. The officers come out of uniform, so there's no weapons in the room, there's no uniforms, anything like that. The dialogues are facilitated by myself, and they're carefully curated. They do a lot of different discussions. in different ways. Like we rarely just have them sit down and just like start talking about things, because that's not really like a helpful way to have a conversation, especially as heavy as they are. And you have to understand too, the power dynamics are so different, right? Like you've got an adult who's a police officer and predominantly white, and then you got this like young man who's like 16, 17, right? So it's like, we have to be really intentional about how those dialogues happen. But what I always tell young men is this program is not to get you to like police officers. So let's just take that off the table. There's no pressure for you to like come in here and sit down and like, you got to like share your truth. And let's try and create a space that is safe rather than a space that is equal. Because a lot of people would say it again, like, well, you know, like everybody comes to this equal table, and it's like, that's not helpful to our conversation, because it's not true. We're not all equal at this table. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have this organization. We have to understand that there's dynamics and different things. And so we work around those and just being really intentional about that to create a space where there is no expectations, right? For the youth particularly. And the conversations have been great. You know, that we do poetry sessions where they're writing poetry together and sharing those. We started a walking tour this summer where the youth took officers to their communities and got to take them around, and we do all sorts of things. And so people learn, people grow. It's not always easy, right? Like, because I'm a Black man too, right? So I'm affected by things like Kyle Rittenhouse not going to jail and George Floyd being murdered. So it's not like I'm just in a vacuum too. I have my own feelings and emotions. So it's a balance. You got to be a bridge builder in my position, where you're trying to bring two sides together that you are also opinionated on, right? So it's a work in progress every year. And I would just I always imagine it like a recipe, like we're just refining it. We've only run it 5 years, and that's not a lot of time in 6 weeks to really try and figure out how do we perfect that interaction. So it's a work in progress, but I feel very confident in my ability to create a space, primarily, first and foremost, for the young men to be in a space where they can at least be safe.
All right, thank you so much, Lakayana. I'm gonna have to cut this off right there. I think we could all do this all day long. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I can't thank you enough. Again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be with us today. I know you're a member. I would hope to have you here every week, but thank you for putting the presentation together, and I'm certain all of our members learned a lot today. So I appreciate all the great work that you're doing in our community.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
And we did have one guest with us. I missed it. Where do we go? Dirya, thank you so much for being with us all the way from Istanbul. And thank you so much for Angel, your reflection today, reminding us about Pearl Harbor and those that we lost there. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Angel. And thanks again for our chair of the day, Leslie. And of course, thank you so much, Lakayana, for your presentation today. I'd also like to thank everybody behind the scenes for helping our programs run so smoothly. Thank you so much to Skylar and to Carol and everybody else that contributes to this production. Most importantly, thank you to all of our committee chairs and to our members for everything that you do. As we close today's meeting, let's remember why we're here. We serve to change lives. Let's continue to focus on the lives that we change and continue to step up and to do the right thing. Thank you for joining. This meeting's adjourned.